of the most problematic issues facing Christians is the fact that the oldest lie in the Bible, ye shall be as gods, knowing both good and evil, is now the biggest bait in technology by the billionaires, soon to be trillionaires, on the planet. And what's happening, and you brought it up, and I'll deal with it specifically, but our True Legends Conference is coming up in Branson, Missouri, September 14th through the 16th of 2018. We're focusing on transhumanism and the hybrid age. We're going to have a little different agenda when I say that. You know, there's a lot of prophecy conferences out there. There's a lot of conferences that settle on this, that, and the other thing. But we believe that, you know, by focusing on the biggest issue facing mankind, i.e. your very extinction, ladies and gentlemen, we can draw your attention to how this demands action and resistance and a specific prayer that's going to be involving your children and grandchildren. So many times I have heard that, you know, well, I'm not going to be around here, so who cares? Well, if you understood what's going on, and you have been presented continually with, you know, sex robots and all of the different things taking place, and the no longer necessity to have human beings do your work for you, then you can understand how human beings become expendable. So our conference is going to be totally different, and Tim and I are going to talk at length about what we're doing and how we're doing it. Now, some of the speakers have not been announced. I'll tell you why. We're still negotiating, and two of them are two of the most famous secular guys in the world who are recognized as some very powerful physicists, and also a futurist who understands the very nature of what we're facing. We will have Hugo de Garis, who is the author of you know, the term the Artilect, one of the brightest brains, chemistry and robotics guys in the world. And so what we're trying to present is the world's view and then the Christian's view and response. And by the way, Jesus didn't leave us in the dark about this. I can say this, probably 99% of the Christians who've read Jesus said that if the days weren't short, there'd be no flesh left alive. Yet for the elect's sake, the days are going to be short, and could have even imagined the degree of, how should I say this, contempt for humanity that would manifest in the technology of today. So we're pretty excited about this, and again, it's called Transhumanism in the Hybrid Age, and we believe we'll sell out really fast. Again, this isn't a bait and switch thing. We've contacted some pretty amazing people, and, you know, you see them on televisions as experts, and it's a scheduling issue, or if we can't get them there, we're going to basically provide continual updates on the True Legends website, the conference website, and how do I say this? We're going to lead everybody to not only the main topics of concern, but this is going to be different. It's going to be more what I would say continuing education up until the time of the conference. And now I'm going to let Tim address it, because if you've seen the website, he's been so focused on this, but we're going to talk later through the show and into the second hour about everything that you can imagine or beyond what you can imagine is already in the works at some level by the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. We were all treated to Jurassic Park with Michael Crichton, and obviously everything that you know, came out of the movies about reconstituting DNA, et cetera, et cetera. So Tim, go ahead and take it and share you know, your excitement, and just go wherever you want to go, and when you're ready you can give it back to me, but there's no hurry.
Well, thank you for having me on. I couldn't be more excited about the subject matter of this conference. By the way, before I go any further, our new website is gen6.com. That's GENSIX.com. And for those of you who want to jump on this immediately, because these tickets are going to sell out really fast, you can register for the conference at gen6.com. We've already got a lot of people who've registered. Our last conference sold out in 3 months. We think this one's going to sell out even faster. So let me get that out of the way. Now, as I was saying, the subject matter of this conference couldn't be more exciting for me: transhumanism and the hybrid age. And the reason why it is so exciting is because it is the subject that I consider to be the most cutting edge and the most pertinent, the most important to the times in which we live. The implications of transhumanism, of the transhumanist movement, and of the hybrid age could not be more dire. The ramifications are extreme to the uttermost. And we're bringing together in this conference some of the most powerful minds that have dealt with transhumanism, that have developed artificial intelligence, and that have been studying this topic. And we've got, as Steve said, we've got a handful of speakers already announced. There are more to be announced. Some big hitters in the world of radio and science are coming on board. And so we're very excited. We're extremely excited about this conference. Last year's conference was an extremely dynamic event. We got so much feedback after that, during and after that conference, so much feedback from people who attended the conference or who live streamed the conference or who purchased the DVDs, telling us that that was the most incredible conference that they had ever attended or seen. And the atmosphere in that building at the Mansion Theater in Branson, Missouri was electric. And we did not, and I've said this before on different radio programs and TV shows, we did not plan, we didn't coordinate, the speakers did not coordinate, we didn't plan what we were going to talk about, we were not in communication as to what we were going to be discussing in our presentations at the conference. And yet, from Steve kicking it off with his intro all the way to the end of the conference, we were all in sync. We were all synchronized together in the message that each of us brought forth, and it was absolutely divinely orchestrated, and it was incredibly powerful. So needless to say, we decided, because of all the feedback that we were getting from everybody immediately after that conference, people were coming up to me and to Steve during the conference saying, please do another one next year. So Steve and I came back to Bozeman, and we talked, and we decided, let's launch another conference in 2018. And this year we're dealing with transhumanism in the hybrid age. And what a lot of people don't understand is that we're not just talking about artificial intelligence. We're not just talking about robotics. We're not just talking about a couple of these emergent technologies. What is so powerful about the near future is the convergence of all of these emerging technologies together. And the convergence is going to lead to the redefining of human being. It will redefine what it means to be a human being. The ramifications of that cannot be overstated. And a lot of people have forgotten that when we crossed over into the 21st century, on the 26th day of June in the year 2000, at the beginning of the second millennium, we entered the dawn of a new hybrid age. That was the day when the Human Genome Project was consummated, when Bill Clinton held his conference in the White House and they announced the consummation of the Human Genome Project. The human genome had been successfully mapped. That was the beginning of a new hybrid age. And when I say a new hybrid age, of course, what I mean by that is it's not the first hybrid age, it's the second. The first hybrid age happened before the flood of Noah, when the Watchers descended to the earth and inseminated human women, and they gave birth to hybrids, giants and other hybrid entities. That was the first hybrid age. And remember, the first hybrid age culminated in the flood of Noah, the total destruction of the earth. We have now entered, we are more than a decade now, a decade and a half into the second hybrid age, and it's just beginning. And the second hybrid age will culminate in the destruction of the earth again, this time by fire, as prophesied in the scriptures, and by Jesus himself. That's the kind of implications we're dealing with when we talk about transhumanism in the hybrid age. It isn't just a fad, an interesting conference topic. It really is the most cutting-edge issue of our time, and it really does have eternal implications when you talk about modifying the human genome, or when you talk about the cyborgization of human beings merging with machines, and the artificial intelligence, the nanotechnology. All of these technologies are converging as we speak. They're coming together, and there is a sinister purpose behind that convergence. There's a sinister purpose there that we that has been exposed to some degree in Steve's books and Tom's books, and that we're going to further discuss at the conference. And so, and by the way, we're not anti-technology. This isn't a conference against technology. This isn't about being for or against emerging technologies. This is about being for or against the human race as God created it. That's what this is about. The stakes could not be higher.
And I think that it's important for people to understand that the technology of destruction, every one of the higher-ranking billionaire and I would call them technocrats, are already gleefully talking about they shall be as God and have and achieve eternal life. Now, that's in direct contradiction of the Scripture. And by the way, when Bill Joy wrote his classic masterpiece, Why the Future Doesn't Need Us, I'm going to quote something, and then I'm going to deal with it. Joy argued, this is in the year 2000, okay? And I read this on the air. I remember the year it came out. Obviously, that was 7 years after I'd started on talk radio. Bill Joy argues that developing technologies provide a much greater danger to humanity than any technology before has ever presented. In particular, he focuses on genetic engineering, nanotechnology, and robotics. He argues that 20th century technologies of destruction, such as the nuclear bomb, were limited to large governments due to the perplexity and the complexity and the cost of such devices, as well as the difficulty in acquiring the required materials. But then he goes on to he makes a statement that increasing computer power, and when you're coupling it with advances in biotechnology, where now we've got even the basement biotechnicians altering their own DNA, and some of the advanced technologies, we'll get into those like CRISPR technology, Cas9, CAS9, guys like Tim and I, and by the way, Tom Horn and I think Tim by extension, he'll get on the infamous list that Oxford University declared. I don't know if this is, something to scream about or say thank you, Jesus, over, but that Tom Horn, myself, and I think there are a few others named, are the leaders of the transhumanist resistance. Well, what I would like to say is I am, and Tim is dedicated, and Tom is dedicated the rest of his life, amongst others who are outspoken on this issue, of saying, look, the point is this is all designed to destroy that which God created in the Garden of Eden. Now, that which was created in the Garden of Eden. Now, I'm on record. I've written, you've read a lot of the stuff I've written. Tim and I have spoken about the pre-Adamic race. But so when Jesus said, just as in the days of Noah, so shall it be in the coming, in those days leading up to the coming of the Son of Man. And what most people don't understand is prehistory, prior to Genesis 1:1 and 1:2, and by the way, this is in the book that Tom Horn and I wrote. I wish the title Cloud Eaters would have been a little bit more defined, and the first, 5 to 7 chapters I wrote deals with the pre-Adamic rebellion of Lucifer and the destruction of the great civilizations of the Golden Age. Now, listen, Christians will fight over anything, but they won't fight for their very existence in the future. That's my new statement. Christians will fight amongst themselves over almost anything, but they won't fight, I guess you'd say, in concert against that which is ready to destroy them. Does that make sense? Yeah, and by the very definition of some of the different policy and those who responded to Bill Joy's article with sarcasm and character assassination, they basically call guys like Tim and I, Tom Horn and others, doom and gloom techno-futurists. How about this? Reality-based futurists who know the outcome of technology. It might surprise people that in Greek mythology, even, quote, gods made a robot named Talos, T-A-L-O-S. Some people believe, and I do, that it was the celebration of Talos, that was a giant, 100 feet, let's say 98 to 100 feet tall over the Colossus of Rhodes. But the point is that it's not something new, this desire for robotic. Now, I want to go on record, and I'm on record. I did Coast to Coast the other night for 2 hours. There is no such thing as sentience that will be achieved by artificial intelligence. Self-awareness, maybe. But there are human factors of the spirit that cannot be reproduced in a godly function, but will be reproduced in an ungodly function. Demons will possess the machine. I think somebody wrote a book called The Ghost of the Machine. I'll be dealing at Branson about the ramifications of when machines become demon-possessed. When you're talking about autonomous robot swarms, and by the way, I think I was the first guy years ago to use the term slaughter bots, and now I see that others are using it. And just to put people on my critics at silence them, when I share this, it's to illustrate the point. When Jesus said, "Get thee behind me, Satan," he was not just saying, "Okay, Satan, I'm up front." That's not what he was saying. He knew that no matter what he said, the devil would come to take away what he had spoken. So this is why, Doug, there's almost a time, if you will, lock on stuff that I talk about or write about. So it doesn't matter what the critics say or the haters, what matters is the fact that you understand the ramifications, because God declares the end at the beginning. That is what Jesus did, and that's why the parable of the seed that falls on the different ground. And that's why the birds of the air, a good example, come and steal away the seed, just like right now. What Tim and I are talking about, there are those listening all over the world to this broadcast. There are some that will receive it, pray about it, and know it's true. Others will say they're crazy and won't accept it. So we are now, and I think I coined the term maybe a decade ago, 15 years ago, Technogeddon, okay, where technology will bring about the ultimate conflict between God and man. And listen, let me make something clear about the mark of the beast. In my educated and researched opinion after 45 years, you won't have to, the technology of the beast and the beast system is already here. But what most people don't understand is that you have to have a beast that you will demand his worship. To put that into context, you got me? You won't be damned because of the technology of the beast. You'll be damned because the guy who claims to be God will say, you either worship me and acknowledge me, or, tickets off with your head. So while everybody's wrapped up in this technology and that technology, what we're trying to do in transhumanism and the hybrid age is lay this out. And thank God there are people that are much more linear, defined, Tim being one of them, Tom being one of them, and every other guest, that will be speaking there, and the speakers, in order to present such a linear, and these are words that are foreign to me, but the wonderful presentation that everybody gave, Derek Gilbert, L.A. Marzulli, the people that were at Branson 1, let's just call it that, gave a wonderful presentation. The irony is that I needed another hour and a half to talk, and they cut me off. That won't happen this year. And for the record, I won't be the last speaker. I'll be probably one of the afternoon speakers. But as we get to the point of transhuman, the hybrid age, it was a hybrids, as Tim defined. Hybrids are what the fallen angels produced when they came unto the earth women and produced a race of giants. Again, I use two terms that most of my even fellow authors don't use. I use Nephilim and I use Rephaim. The Rephaim are the giants, and Nephilim were those who descend from the fallen angels. The word Nephilim only appears in the Old Testament in Genesis 6, before the flood, and then in after the flood. In the same statement, there were giants in those days and after those days. After those days is after the days of Noah. So this is a pretty exciting thing, because we're going to be talking about how DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid, RNA, and all of the NAs and the variations of them are playing into DARPA's, Defense Advanced Research Project Agency's Super Soldier program. Now they've got muscles that are 200 times the strength of a human muscle. 200 times. So the thing that's interesting to me is that conference, I'm choosing my words very carefully, this conference that we're having that's going to take place on the 14th September in Branson, you mark my words, when we are at that conference, so much will have happened leading up to that conference that it will almost be, seriously, I believe, an antidote from God through the speakers that will be there to basically try and help men's hearts not to fail for fear for looking after those things coming upon the earth. Go ahead, Tim.
Well, a couple of years ago, actually about probably a good 8 years ago, I remember looking into the Human Genome Project and into a lot of the emerging technologies, and I would discuss these things with some of my friends or family members, and they would always kind of roll their eyes and say, well, you know, that sounds like science fiction, and it's probably not going to turn out as drastic as you say, because I was saying, you know, at some point in the future, these technologies are going to be used to drastically modify human beings, to drastically modify the human race on a large scale. And today, in the year 2018, actually starting probably back in 2014, we're in the midst of a new movement that is a movement that is taking the gene editing technology out of the corporate laboratories and out of the government laboratories and into the living rooms and basements of a new growing biohacking community, an international biohacking community. There is a burgeoning biohacking movement taking place right now, right under our feet at the grassroots level. And it's using the same technologies that these large corporations have been using for years, namely the CRISPR-Cas9 gene editing technology. And at this point in time, right now, you can go on the internet and purchase a CRISPR-Cas9 kit to modify your own DNA for less than $1,000. Less than $1,000. And so what 10 years ago seemed far off is now swiftly upon us. And what the advances that some of these biohackers, and by the way, many of these guys they're not lettered. They don't have degrees. They learn their craft on the internet or through reading books and so forth. These guys have already achieved some absolutely incredible things. They've already cured certain diseases in themselves, in their family members, and in their local clients who they work with. A lot of the biohacking is taking place. People are doing experiments on their pets. Most of it's taking place on using bacteria, modifying bacteria. People are making glow-in-the-dark beer. They're making their pets glow in the dark. And they're doing it in their basement, in their living room, in their garage. So the genetic revolution is upon us. It is here. And it doesn't do us any good to pretend that it's not here, to look away, or to try and be willfully ignorant of the world that is changing, again, beneath our feet. It is here, and it's going to have, as I said, dire implications for us, and even more dire implications for our children and our grandchildren. And our kids are going to grow up in a world in which their classmates in college or even in high school are going to outperform them, greatly outperform them, because they're going to have bio-integrated computer chips that have been implanted in their cerebral cortex or in some other part of their body that are enhancing their mental capabilities. They're going to be able to, and this isn't science fiction, this is fact. They're going to be able to store memory in the chip that's implanted in their bodies. They're going to be able to increase the function of their brains through both different biotechnological means, through the implantation of electronics, or through genetic modification. Genetic modification is already taking place probably in your local hospital. We are already in the age of gene modification. What we're doing right now is gene therapy. We've just begun. But remember, that's in the hospital. Outside of the hospital, the biohacking community is moving at a much faster pace because they don't have restrictions and the same regulations that these hospitals have. And they don't have to worry about getting budgets approved and getting their experiments approved like the universities do. Universities have all kinds of hoops that they have to jump through when they want to do experimentation or branch out and try new things. Now that genetic engineering might be happening in your neighbor's garage, there is no way to put that genie back in the bottle. There wasn't anyways, but especially now that the biohacking community is moving forward at such an expedited pace, there is no way to close Pandora's box. It is open, and we're talking specifically about genetic modification. If we move over to the next stream and we talk about nanotechnology, or we talk about the advancements that are taking place in cybernetics, these are all fields which are growing exponentially. They are advancing, they are developing exponentially. They're not following a linear path of development. And this is, you can read Ray Kurzweil's papers on the exponential growth of technology, and it becomes apparent very quickly that within 10, 20 years from now, the world will be drastically different in terms of the biological entities inhabiting it. Because not only are we modifying plants, we're modifying our pets, we're modifying animals, we're going to be modifying ourselves. And what will inevitably happen is we're going to have the creation of a new human species. I call them neo-humans. And they're going to be divergent from the human species. They're going to be in many ways superior to the human species, certainly in their capability for processing information, their brains. As Steve was saying, there's biohackers right now who have already increased the density of their muscles. They did it in their basement. They increased the density of their muscles. In other words, they made themselves stronger by using CRISPR-Cas9 technology to modify their own DNA. And we just had, a few months ago, that Vladimir Putin, when he was addressing a group of university students, basically came out and said that we are entering, and what he was probably hinting at is we are already in a super soldier arms race. And obviously, people who've been listening to Steve Quayle for all these years know that that's old hat at this time. I mean, it is surging forward the arms race aspect of genetics, robotics, artificial intelligence, and nanotechnology. There are other streams of technologies, emerging technologies that are in play, but those are the green technologies, and those are the ones that are most important to the modification of the human species. There's also what is in my opinion, the most dangerous technology is germline genetic modification. Germline genetic modification enables scientists or biohackers to edit the genome, to make a change in their own DNA or somebody else's DNA that then becomes inheritable. It passes on through subsequent generations. Now, if that is done on a mass scale, you can literally change the genetic code of the human race in one generation. And let that sink in, because that's what we're approaching. We are approaching a time when the whole-scale genetic modification of humanity is going to be possible. It already is, but we're in the very early stages. As I said, we entered the new hybrid age in the year 2000 with the consummation of the Human Genome Project. And again, and this is what I want people to understand, and this is something that we will be highlighting at the conference. We are entering the days of Noah all over again. And that phrase gets kicked around and overused, sometimes misused. The days of Noah, the days of Noah, the days of Noah. But there literally are no other days from where we stand now on the timeline of history, going all the way back to Noah, that could be described as poignantly as the day we now live in as the days of Noah 2.0. We are in the days of Noah 2.0. We entered that some time ago, some decades ago, and it's going to look different. There's some different aspects that are in play, the artificial intelligence and so forth, but the result will be the same. The result will be the corruption of all flesh on the earth. It's beginning again. It's happening again for the last time, because as I said, the old world was destroyed in the waters of the flood the first time it happened, and this current world, the current earth we inhabit now will be destroyed by fire according to the prophecy of Scripture. So there is no, as I said in the beginning, there is no other topic that is more prescient, that is more important for the times in which we live than transhumanism and the hybrid age, the new hybrid age, because we are living at the end of the age, and these technologies are accelerating at such a expedited pace that it's hard to keep track of where we are. When we talk about, for example, nanotechnology, they have a goal, and when I say they, I mean the scientists who are working with nanotechnology have a goal of creating an artificial human body using nanotechnology. Some believe that they'll be able to be close to having that artificial human body, or at least a prototype of it, by the year 2030. I mean, the ramifications are mind-blowing to all of this.
Virtual reality is, if you will, the devil's multidimensional playground to separate people from the consequences of human beings having to make a choice on who they're going to follow, like Bob Dylan's old song when supposedly he converted, but you got to serve somebody. When I wrote Genetic Armageddon, Today's Technology, Tomorrow's Monsters, you can tell, and by that title, that was pretty or what would you say, confrontational, excuse me, but also pretty telling, because now we're there. And when I start talking about sex robots, and I'll handle this delicately, because look, I'm no prude, and I'm no, how should I say, a stranger to the subject, but the point is, by that I mean having come out of the world, but also written about the world that would be, when you consider Blade Runner was the actual, I think, one of the first movies that was really intimating at men having a sexual relationship with a robot and vice versa. Now, in all the years I've been saved, that's 46 years right about now, the thing that I never understood is the Isaiah prophecy in Isaiah chapter 4, verse 1, and it says this: in that day 7 women shall take hold of one man, saying, we will eat our own bread and wear our own apparel, only let us be called by thy name, to take away our reproach. And basically they were saying, we're childish and we're non-married. What I see happening is this, that men, and I'll be dealing with this at Branson, and trust me, it'll be modified by there, but when you understand what happens in the human body through sexual intercourse, you can understand how the fallen angels interjected themselves literally into human women. And listen, Doug, you know this, I get all kinds of flack over this, but the point being is simply, every single civilization of note talks about the gods coming and consorting with earth women. And I've said this over the years in writing about the aliens, meaning, extraterrestrials, extra-dimensionals. It's unique to me that they have to have so much interest in human sexual physiology. So Isaiah chapter 4, verse 1, and in that day 7 women shall take hold. So here's what I'm saying. Oh boy, go delicately on this one, Steve. If they continue to make the headway they have been and are already, and are able to achieve not only physical stimulation, but also neurochemical stimulation. Obviously in human sexuality, specific chemicals are produced in the brain that result in climax and also result in everything from sleep to all the good benefits, but mostly reproduction. The oldest covenant in the world is that which God established with Adam and Eve when he created the covenant of marriage and then told them to be fruitful and multiply. And in procreation, God allowed us the marvelous ability to produce, if you will, little us's. And the little us's were to carry on the heritage that we as godly parents would pass on to them. With few exceptions, that whole part of the equation is done. It's finished. It's over. So I'm going to be, again, sharing with everybody, when I came up with a word like snuffbots, SNUFFBOTS, with all the pedophilia revelations, with all the satanic ritual abuse and cannibalism, and the entire world of the dark occult, but at the end of the day, the lust for human flesh is the appetite of demons expressed to humans consuming other humans. So when you put it into that context, snuffbots just simply meaning a robot that is programmed to kill its consort. Doesn't matter if it's a woman having sex with a male robot. Doesn't matter if it's a female robot having sex with a male. They're going way beyond, Doug, the ability of most people to understand. It was only, I don't know, Branson time or right about that time that I got released from the Lord to share the future that he had shown me, 45, 46 years ago, when he gave me a vision of the future, but told me it would only be presented as the events were ready to be released. And so the idea is this, that not only will the sex robots take a more prevalent role in society, that there will be an abandonment of sex, human sex, to basically robotic sex. Now imagine, ladies and gentlemen, if you will, and I'm just going to deal with human reproduction, and let's just call this female robotic reproductive receptacles being pre-programmed for a genetic variant that is in the cerebral cortex of the female robot to either identify to service the human or to destroy the human. Tim talked about the stuff that's going on in the basement. And basically, we're seeing now people modifying their human genomes. The biohacking, and let's just call it too, the robo-hacking that's going to be taking place will be off the charts. It's beyond Pandora's box on steroids. It's what Jesus called it, the end of the age. Now, people ask me all the time, and they asked him this, and they've asked you this, Doug, in your emails and others, what does this have to do with salvation? Everything. God told us to go forth into all the world and preach the gospel. Good news is that Jesus Christ died for his Adamic creation that would repent from their old ways, from sin, of rebellion, and everything else we as humans do that's evil, and embrace him as Savior and allow him to transform our fallen nature into a redeemed nature. And it's amazing because if you look at what Jesus taught his disciples versus what Muhammad taught his disciples, the thing is that Jesus taught the one word that's absolutely missing in the entire universe of every other belief system in the world: love. Define love for me. Love is not passion. Love is not basically physical stimulation. Love is not, let's say, mental assent. There is a factor in love that can only be defined by the originating source of love. God is love, imparting that into his creation. When I saw Jesus face to face, and he looked into my eyes, and I looked into his eyes, and as a sinner who had confessed my sin and accepted him, when I say to people, there's no way to explain it except every atom in your being comes alive with acceptance and forgiveness. Everything explodes with the L word, love, and you know that he who created you is more than capable of redeeming you, loving you. As I would call this a subatomic hug on the power of God level that only he can grab. And that's the best I can do. I'm a human, sometimes I have thought it would be nice to change some of my negative characteristics, but that's the Holy Spirit's job and not me getting a hold of a DNA kit. But the point is that now we're talking about sex bots. And so women are going to be forsaken. And when I say this, it's Western women that first embraced the birth control pill. It's Western women that first embraced, I guess you'd say, sexuality without responsibility. I grew up in the 60s. I grew up in that age where, free love, free this, free that. But people found out as they aged, there was nothing free about it. It paid a price that took its toll. So why transhumanism, the hybrid age, is so important? I don't believe, and Doug, and I think Tim has said it his way, I'll say it my way, there is no more important subject matter. When you Hugo de Garis wrote Artificial Intellect, the Artellect, and the name of his book, he said there's two types of people. There would be basically the Terrans, who would be guys like us, and there'd be the cosmists who are shooting through the stars. And I said to Tim, I said, well, there's going to be a third one, and that's going to be, I haven't got a great name yet for it, but I would call it Historic Realists Standing for God, STRG or something, Historic Realists Standing for God, whatever the acronym is about that. But the point is critical. Now, if anybody thinks that this is just a pipe dream or our worst nightmares, forgive me. I wrote about our worst nightmares, 25 years ago. I've been following it up. And it's important that people, and this is it. This is the single most important story there is out there right now, in my opinion. Go ahead, Tim.
Well, obviously, I couldn't agree more. And what we're trying to do here with the True Legends, the Conference 2018, is bring guys like Hugo de Garis from the scientific world. De Garis was and is involved in building artificial brains and artificial intelligence. I mean, he is one of the foremost leaders in the development of artificial intelligence worldwide. He's currently residing in China, working with the Chinese, developing their artificial intelligence and their robots and so forth that they're building over there. And so we want to penetrate into the secular realm with this conference, with the subject matter of this conference, and bring the biblical view, which it's easy to deal with some of the obvious implications of robotics and artificial intelligence, in that they're going to be used for war. They're going to be, as Hugo de Garis wrote in his book, The Artellect War, that there will be a future contention, and I believe he's absolutely right, between those two groups, the ones that want to build massively intelligent machines and the ones that are saying, no, that's not a good idea. And the reason why it's not a good idea is because what happens when artificial intelligence, when robots, when their IQ surpasses our own, when they decide that human beings are the scourge of the earth and that the earth would be better off without us. And that's not science fiction. It's a logical deduction when you think about the machines becoming smarter than us. And Hugo de Garis says, when we say smarter, we're talking trillions of times smarter. And the reason why they know that the machines will be trillions of times smarter is because their ability to process information will be that of a supercomputer. That's part of the thrust of the transhumanist agenda. We are human beings, because of the fall, I contend, are confined to these very debilitated, broken biological bodies. And our bodies have a ceiling in terms of, there's a cap in terms of our ability to process information in our brains, the firing of our neurons and our neural pathways, and our biology just does not allow us to do the same things that a machine can do that's uninhibited by the same biological debilities. And what the transhumanists ultimately, what they want is to shed Adam. And what I mean by that is they recognize the human condition. We all recognize the human condition every day that we wake up and we're getting older and we watch those around us get sick, or we get sick ourselves, and our friends and our loved ones start to die. The human condition is apparent day and night to every human being. And what is the human condition? It's sin and death. It's the condition of the fall. We are living the consequence of the fall. And I presented in Branson this in 2017 at the conference, and I believe I've spoken about this on your show before, Doug and Joe, that right now we are in a genetic crisis. The human species is experiencing a genetic crisis, and it's unavoidable. It's irresistible. We are decaying. Our genome is in a severe state of decay. Our genetic clock is expiring. And there are so many mutations in the human genome that there's no way to reverse the process of mutation that we're the mutational load, as they call it, that we're experiencing, that the human race is experiencing, which, by the way, absolutely negates the evolution of the species, specifically the evolution of the human race, because according to the theory of evolution, our genomes, our genetic information ought to be increasing, not decreasing. And what we're experiencing at this present time is a decrease in our genetic information, and we're getting aberrations in our genetic code to such an extent that there are tens of thousands of genetic mutations in the human gene pool. That is an unsustainable mutational load on the human populace. In other words, we are heading for death the death of the human genome, genetic extinction due to genetic entropy. And I would encourage everybody listening who's interested in this to get a copy of the book Genetic Entropy and the Mystery of the Genome by Dr. J.C. Sanford. Phenomenal book, which has been largely overlooked in the scientific community because, again, it negates the theory of evolution. So what's happening is we are at a place in time. The human race is at a place in time. We're at the end of the age, and our genetic clock is expiring. And everybody knows it. Everybody is aware of the human condition. That's why we all innately know that we have a need for salvation. There are those of us who have received the gift of God, received the salvation in Jesus Christ, and this situation that we're in because of Adam will be rectified in the resurrection. That's our hope. But those who see the human condition, recognize the human condition, and reject the gospel, they see it differently. Now that they have the tools, the technological tools to, in their words, to become gods themselves, they want to do an end around the cross of Jesus Christ. They want to do an end around the resurrection of the dead in Christ. And they want to reach immortality by means of human technology. And in fact, that's probably not the best way to say it, because I don't believe it's all human, derived from human beings. They want to get there through technological means, through the vehicle of technology. And that is what transhumanism is. The transhumanist goal, they say, is to improve the human condition, but it is not to improve the human condition. It is to shed Adam, to become something other than a human being, because if you are a human being, you are subject to the fall of Adam until the resurrection. And as a human being, in these biological suits that we wear, we're in a body of sin. That's what Paul says, that you're in a body of sin until the day you die. And it's amazing to watch the recognition of this fact, given all of the scientific data that reveals how dire our situation is as human beings on the earth, how fragile our biology is. And by the way, human biology was not created to be fragile. Adam and the antediluvian patriarchs were extremely robust physically and spiritually and mentally. We are pathetic specimens of human beings today, living today. And but Adam was not. And even after he fell, he lived 900 and some years, as did most of the patriarchs lived 700 plus years in the pre-flood age. And that wasn't just because there was something magical about them. It was because their genetic architecture was almost impeccable. They were so close to the source. They did not have a genetic mutational load. It slowly developed over time, and it accelerated after the flood. And here we are today. We have experienced generations of genetic entropy. We are in dire straits right now. Our species is facing a crisis, and I pointed out at the conference, and I believe I've said on your show before, that the proof is in the pudding. I mean, look at the cancer rates; they're off the charts. Why are they off the charts? Yes, because of the chemicals. Yes, because of the vaccinations and so forth, and the genetic modification of our food. Yes. But those are all additives to the underlying problem, which is genetic degeneration. That's why there's so much cancer. The human genome is in tatters. And so, at the end of the age, we have the transhumanists who are beginning to see a way to get around the human condition, to not only, as I said, improve the human condition, but to shed the human condition altogether. And so they're exploring these ideas of transferring their consciousness into machines, into robots, exploring the idea, not only exploring, developing the technology to do this, to create nanotech body in their attempt to circumvent of Jesus Christ, to circumvent the human condition, the fall of Adam, and the present condition of the human race. Transhumanists are working tirelessly to construct for themselves, either to modify their own bodies genetically or to construct for themselves new bodies into which they can transpose their consciousness. And there are a host of different technologies that are being developed to this end right now. And that's the basic doctrine of the transhumanists. They want to, quote unquote, improve the human condition, but what they really mean is they want to circumvent the human condition, and by doing so, get around salvation in the cross, the exclusive hope for the human race in the cross of Jesus Christ. That is precisely what transhumanism is. And so, as Steve said earlier, this is that old lie that was whispered from the mouth of the serpent to the mother of our race in the Garden of Eden, that you shall be as the gods. And their goal, of course, their ultimate goal is immortality. And I don't believe that, and I agree with Steve, I don't believe that machines will ever be able to gain true sentience, true consciousness. But there are a host of implications involved in the transference of one's consciousness into machines, or creating non-human bodies for human souls or spirits or minds, or however you want to, whatever context you want, to go into those bodies, to inhabit those artificial bodies. The spirit of man was made to inhabit the human body. This is all a brazen slap in the face of the Maker. And that is what we really need to understand, that the transhumanist agenda could not be more Luciferian. It is utterly Luciferian. And the legislation is already being laid behind the scenes by transhumanists, by futurists, by people who are already thinking in terms of robots and artificial intelligence having citizenship. It was a token act recently that they made the Sophia robot a citizen of Saudi Arabia. She actually became a citizen of Saudi Arabia. Of course, that means very little at this stage in artificial intelligence, but it was a token act that they did by making that robot a citizen, because what they're saying is we have to be ready to receive into the citizenry of our nations artificially intelligent robotic entities. And when you have legislation being worked on, when you have universities working on the ethics behind these things, this isn't science fiction. We're going to be seeing this very rapidly. And again, you talk artificial intelligence, you talk robotics. You can't talk artificial intelligence and robotics without throwing in the genetics, without throwing in the nanotechnology, without throwing in the cyborgization of the human race, which goes hand in hand with all these things. It is a witch's brew of transhumanism and Luciferianism.
Steve?
I think one of the things, Doug, that's really critical for people to understand is that, again, it's not just the amplification of superhuman traits. By the way, this is exactly what Hitler meant and Nietzsche meant in the Übermensch, the Superman, the overcomer. And for the record, Mengele's ability to clone humans, we always hear about his ability to twin humans, was really picked up upon by what I would call the beginning of the secret government and the intelligence field when OSS, Office of Strategic Services, turned into the CIA, and we brought in some of Germany's finest intel agents under Operation Paperclip and others. Now, what most people are really wondering, and I know that, I don't know if you've seen it, but Doug, we're going to be presenting at Branson a pretty much a skull based on the conquistadors of a pre-flood giant. The giant would have been about anywhere between 30 and 36 feet tall. The giants before the flood of Noah were different in size than after the flood of Noah. And so the thing that people lose track of always, and Tim and I deal with this continuing emails, and we hope we make it clear, but I'll say it again, a life force beyond just the human life force. You're dealing with a body, a hybrid body that isn't subject to the gravitational effects that a normal human would be. And so when we talk about genetic memory, I want everybody to understand this. The giants weren't like the Shrek ogres. They weren't based, and by the way, the word ogre literally means a man-eating giant. The thing that's really relevant in this talk is that the genetic memory that is already being, what should I say, extracted and used in the laboratories of the world, the deep underground military bases, they have a genetic memory. And I remember talking about this where they were talking about the human DNA could hold enough beyond I think it was one strand of DNA, wasn't Tim, that could hold more than the Library of Congress, something on that level.
That's right, yeah.
So what composite intelligence, what composite wickedness that's stored in the genetic memory of the giant's genome, which is called a triple helix, and that's why the book title I wrote is Xenogenesis. If people want to know how this is going to play out, they need to acquire my book, Xenogenesis. And even tonight, Tim, while we're on the air with Doug and Joe, I got an email from a guy saying, well, I think all this chemtrail stuff is just to scatter radar and maybe dissipate radiation. Well, I told the guy, go do a search on weather warfare, weather modification, and the Air Force. We own the weather 2025. Doug, I've said this on your show, on Nori's show. I was told by multiple four-star generals that the whole purpose of geoengineering is to change, if you will, to mutate, to bring about a difference in the atmosphere so that when these entities return, it's more like the good old days. Now, that's hard for a lot of people to understand. So at Branson, we're going to have two things. Actually, we're going to have three things, but I'm going to keep one kind of a secret, because I can't hold secrets. I try and buy a gift for my wife for our anniversary or something, and I start giving her clues. So I'm giving you clues, everyone. We're going to have the giant skull on display, and I'll let Tim explain how we arrived at the size of that skull based on the conquistadors' really specific chronicling and categorizing this. Then we're going to have a 12 giant based on the actual anatomical representation of body mass, size, and not only just tall. Everybody thinks tall. It's not just tall. It's every dimension multiplied and magnified, and those will be on display. Now, why will those be on display in a transhumanism and hybrid? Because Tim made it really clear at the beginning of the show, Doug and Joe, that this is about doing away with God's creation, with literally those whom Jesus died for. The scripture is very clear. Jesus did not come and die to redeem the angels that sinned. That is in the book of Hebrews. He came to redeem the lost that God had created. So the thing is that the genetic memory in the DNA of these entities, that's why when I was originally contacted, and I hope the gentleman that contacted me with more stars than I'm talking about will just send an email to me and tell me that I heard you accurately. He basically made the statement that the entire area of molecular biology and all of the genetic, if you will, research has gone on to identify. The Human Genome Project was never about the human genome. It was about finding what I would call the Nephilim signature in the hybrid or the Repline genome. So those are going to be on display. But what we're going to do, and this is, I think, a value-added service for those who sign up early for their tickets, is weekly we're going to have updates on our website, but we're also going to have, for those who sign up, we're going to have a limited dispersion of information. Now, why is that? Because those who sign up early are helping us to know how to plan for how many people, and as Tim said, we're going to, we think, sell out quickly. People from all over the world that are asking, can we have this, can we have this? So one of the things is the people that sign up to get their videos, and Doug, you saw the videos, and others, I don't think I've ever gotten a complaint about the video set, but we've gotten, a lot of saying, thank you, thank you, thank you. When we turn out the videos from Branson, and we'll call it Branson 2, Transhuman in the Hybrid Age, it's with the expectation that people will go out and they'll share those at Bible studies or say, hey, come over and watch this guy. I used to think he was crazy. We don't have to figure out who that was. But now some of the stuff he's saying makes sense. So we're talking about, if you will, as people sign up and register, we're going to come up with kind of an exclusive emailing to them, just like I had to do because I ran out of time personally at Branson. I didn't even get to I'd say the majority of my presentation, but we went into the studio and we filmed it and we emailed it to everybody who bought a DVD, everybody who live streamed, and everybody who was present that didn't get to hear me. And that's ironic if you think about it. I tried to get the last word, and all I got was my introduction. But anyway, that won't happen again. So things are going to change, and Tim and we've got Darren, who is a marvelous artist and a very bright guy who's going to be, keeping everybody informed on a realistic basis. I want to say this again. You mark my words on this, that as September rolls around, where they're openly talking about what they are speaking of now, they are going to have accelerated the discourse, and they are going to be breaking even more what I would call phenomenal information. Not phenomenal in a good way, but that will, I would say, be a roadmap to the supernatural nature of transhumanism and the hybrid age. And if I had to say in my terminology, as crass as it might be at times, I would simply say this. Transhumanism is another name for human extinction, and the hybrid age, the rule of Lucifer. So we've got, human extinction and the hybrid age simply being the rule of Lucifer. We know Jesus will not let it go that far. But the question is, ladies and gentlemen, if what we're warning you about tonight, and it's coming to pass, Doug, no one can argue with me now about sex bots. No one can argue with me now about basement biotechnicians. I think that's one of the terms I came up with. But the thing that they've got to understand is that there is a thread that goes right back to Genesis, right back to the genetics. And by the way, look at Genesis and genetics. Hello. So we've got the whole then alien card coming in, and there are those who believe they're a supernatural phenomenon, and then there are those of us who believe there are aliens as well as a supernatural phenomenon, being demons. And I'll turn it over to you now, Tim. One of the most interesting things is when I wrote Genetic Armageddon, one of the very first names of downloading a person's soul, mind, intellect, will, and emotions was called the Soul Catcher Chip. SOUL Catcher Chip. There was even a British science fiction, and I don't remember the name of it, but where there was this spaceship kind of thing. It looked like, some crystalline structure upside down, and it was sucking the souls out of human beings. Do you remember that show, Doug?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
I don't. That was what 10 years ago? No.
Oh, no, it was probably closer to 20 years ago.
Yeah.
But anyway, the thing is that this is where we're at, so it's critical. So, ladies and gentlemen, again, those who register early, we will be giving an email to those of you in real time. Same thing if you, sign up for, the DVDs, you'll get on a list too. What we're trying to do is encourage people. And last year, I think we had people from, 14 nations present, Tim, at Branson?
Yes.
And this year, from the emails I'm getting, people really want to know this. And my prayer is for each one of you listening around the world to this broadcast or rebroadcast, that if you feel that God's touching your heart, that you will pray and that God will make a way financially, time-wise, and whatever has to happen in your lives, because it's going to be a different presentation, because I would call it this. It'll be ongoing education in real time, or a reality, if you will, checkup all the way to the Branson Conference, September 14th through the 16th in Branson, Missouri. Go ahead, Tim.
Tim, before you start, I just want to say three things. Number one, genetic Armageddon. When I first, Steve, when I first met you, I had a lot of reservations about what you're talking about now. And look, admittedly, I'm very slow on the uptake. But in looking at the headlines versus what you had written in Genetic Armageddon, I'll just say that you were right on the money. As a matter of fact, at my home, I have Genetic Armageddon, and this is a true story, on my coffee table in my family room. And my neighbor came over the other day, and they keep it there. And my neighbor came over the other day, picked it up, and he looked at me and said, some of this, when was this written? He asked me, and some of this is like right out of the headlines. And I'm not making that up, but I'm paraphrasing, of course. But it's an amazing thing to see what you wrote about and what you spoke about and what you linked to on your website, a quarter century ago, coming to pass. And again, that's not just to blow smoke. I'm amazed, because you were right on the money. So just think about that, folks. The other thing I wanted to mention was the dynamics at the conference. I cannot describe I don't know what was going on there. I don't know what was in the air, but it was to see the interaction between the people. I'm talking about the people in the audience and being with the audience, and it was just fantastic. And it was different than any place else I've ever been in terms of conferences. And that's all, I guess, two things, not three things. So that's what I wanted to say. So thank you, Steve, and thank you, Tim, for a quality event. And I'm looking forward to certainly this coming September and spending some time with some really great people from all around the world, as well as some very fine speakers. Go ahead, Tim.
I want to talk a little bit about the giant statues that Steve referenced that we're going to have at the conference. But let me first say that for those of you who didn't get a chance to go to the conference, we do have a digital download of the conference available on gen6.com in the store. We also have the DVD set, all the sessions, all of the complete roster of speakers from the 2017 conference available on the store as well. We also have something that people have been asking us about that I don't think we've ever really publicly announced yet. We also have a True Legends DVD trilogy pack available for $49.99 on our website. That's all 3 films. It's a package deal, and we finally got around to doing that. So if you've been waiting for that, you can find it right now on the gen6.com webpage that we just created in the store. What I have found very interesting since I've been working with Steve is that Steve and I will talk about something, or we'll put something in a film, and then a year later or 2 years later or sometimes a matter of months later, something will come out of left field to confirm the material that we were dealing with in our films or talking about on the radio. And this always happens. And Steve told me the other day that showed me a picture of the giant skull that we're going to have at the conference that was constructed to scale, built to scale. And I find it ironic that skull is set to arrive at our studio here in the next couple of days. And right during this time, when Steve and I are talking about these statues and thinking about the conference, and an email from, and I want to thank Chad Riley for sending me this email, if he's listening. This video pops up online on Facebook and YouTube by this Bolivian guy that allegedly discovered the footprints of giants in Bolivia in the department, in the region of Tariqa. And why that is so fascinating to me, why it's so interesting how the timing of all of this is because the skull that is arriving to our studio tomorrow, I believe, is literally based on the chronicles that we dealt with in our first film, specifically the record that was written by Bernabe Kobo concerning a body of a giant that was discovered. And you'll remember this if you saw our first film. A body of a giant that was discovered under the bank of a river. The river had dried up, and it had exposed a grave of a giant. And the dimensions of the giant, we could actually calculate, get a rough estimate of dimensions of the giant. Again, this is what the skull is based on. That's coming here tomorrow, because the conquistadors took their swords and stuck them through the eye socket of the skull. And the skull was so large that the sword sunk into the eye socket all the way that the blade sunk through the eye socket all the way to the back of the skull, so that the hilt of the sword was pressing up against the socket. And just by doing a quick Google search on the length of the rapier swords in the 15th and 16th centuries, you can get a good idea of how large that skull was. But again, what's so fascinating is here we've got this skull coming. I get this email I think it was yesterday or 2 days ago, Steve, that we got this email. And where is this giant? Where are these giant footprints discovered? Tariqa, right where the account took place, where the conquistadors found the body of the giant. In fact, let me actually, if I can, read a portion of this just to remind people, because it's amazing to me how these little confirmations come. Again, oftentimes a year after the fact of Steve and I doing research and putting something out there, and then suddenly these little coincidences happen, and it just confirms what we had previously covered. So this is from Bernabe Kobo, who was a Jesuit missionary and historian. He wrote the book called History of the New World in 1653. He is considered to be one of the chroniclers of the history of the conquest of Peru. He's a very reputable chronicler, and much of the history of Peru is derived from Bernabe Kobo's work. And he writes this: one thing that cannot be denied, as much as for the tradition of the Indians themselves, as for the signs and relics that are still present, is that there were once giants in this land. How they came to this land and from where and how long they lived in it is uncertain. The first Spanish conquistadors of this kingdom found in the peninsula and port of Santa Elena, Diocese of Quito, human bones of massive size that they knew belonged to giants, and among them some shin bones more than 3 feet long. Many other bones of the same proportion have been discovered afterwards in other parts of that same province and in the province of Trujillo. Also, bones of equal size have been seen further inland, as in the province of Tucumán and Tariqa. That's where these footprints were found, Tariqa. In the latter of these, in other words, in Tariqa, a whole body was discovered beneath a ravine or bank of a river that the water, having eroded the bank, had unearthed. It was so massive that its grave occupied a very large space, and its skull was so abnormally gigantic that some of the Spaniards, thrusting their swords through its eye socket, could barely reach the back side of its head with the points of their blades. And then he goes on to talk about how other people have reported giants and giant bones in the region of Tariqa, exactly where this video has surfaced from, of this guy who allegedly, and I say allegedly, there's no way that we can verify that this isn't a hoax or that these are actual, that somebody didn't go and cut these footprints into the stone. But as far as I can tell, it looks authentic to me. I can't verify its authenticity, but it looks authentic to me. And again, we have a historical precedence for the existence of giants inhabiting the region of Tariqa. So I thought that was fascinating, given the fact that Steve actually had the giants built to scale that will be at the conference, actually based on this account from Bernabé Cobo, and now footprints are surfacing from the region of Tarija in Bolivia, seemingly confirming the records of the conquistadors. I found that to be fascinating.
Well, Tim, one of the things too that was like this, everything's accelerating, Doug and Joe. The other day, I think it was on the 7th of January, around there, and what is it today? That's 4 days ago. Major water receding in Santa Elena frightens fishermen in Ecuador. Now, why Santa Elena is so important is that's where all of the myths and legends and the natives told the chroniclers of the conquistadors that the giants first landed and came ashore in South America. Now, get this. I was thinking, I was pondering about this, and water covers up something. It always covers up. And immediately, here's the impression I got. When the water of the ocean goes out, okay, it uncovers the beach. And I felt like, seriously, you guys all pray about this. I've told everybody to take to the Lord in prayer. But I felt like the Lord said, the day of the uncovering is fast approaching. So we've got the footprints, and Tim, am I pronouncing it right, Tarija?
Tarija.
Well, that's as good as I can do. Tim and Carl's trying to teach me Spanish.
I can't make my tongue go that way, brother.
Me neither, and boy, getting my tongue there is also. But I have very poor hearing. I apologize, but anyway, they forbear me in love, and But the thing that's critical, here's what I'm saying. I believe the footprint that Mr. Roddy provided was on the 9th, maybe, but. You get what we're trying to say, Doug? Santa Elena, the giants land there. That's the myths, the legends, the chroniclers to the conquistadors. Then within a day or two, the footprints in Tarija. And then you've got the situation unfolding almost daily. And what was interesting to me is when you find the greatest revelations, and I would encourage anybody who lives in a flood zone, if you live in a flood zone in the Ohio, Mississippi River, number one, go out and walk the banks and keep your eyes open for bones, because here's what's cool, the biggest fossil finds in history always seem to follow floods, and they always seem to, I'm talking about giants, not dinosaurs, but I'm talking about that, and so we're seeing something being accelerated, and if you want to go on, just do a search on Santa Elena, Ecuador, you'll get a feel for the bay and everything else. So I guess what I'm trying to say. Yeah, go ahead.
Let me just say, Steve, that story about the footprint of the giants, that video, it's on gen6.com right now. You can go to gen6.com. I posted the story there. You can see the video and the chronicle that I just read. I just wanted to let people know if they're interested, then go right to Gen6 to find it.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I've gotten asked so many times, well, where are the giants? And by the way, the new film coming out that isn't like an episode 4, but it's Gen 6 on the Egyptians of the Pacific Rim and the Grand Canyon and the Smithsonian cover-up. We tried to get a certain individual to get us access and everything, and lo and behold, God bless you, brother GC, God provided a brother who had literally been allowed to go into the secret, if you will, storage buildings of the Smithsonian. He basically said they're 100 yards long and intersecting corridors 100 yards, and they get down 4 floors. Well, the fascinating thing is what he talked about were the Egyptian artifacts, were the Egyptian mummies that were found in the area of the Grand Canyon. He then went on to talk about how he was related to one of the most famous geologists in the history of the Grand Canyon, who followed in Powell's footsteps and subscribed to the same, if you will, cover-up and cover-over of diffusionism, meaning that the Egyptians were in this part of the world in 235 BC. And so what the new video, probably ready, I guess, mid-February, about 70 minutes, and it's remarkable. The amount of, if you will, petroglyphs, the amount of written records, the amount of maritime records, the advanced mathematics that Aristophanes possessed, and others that let me say this. The library at Alexandria, Egypt, was burned because of all of its ties to the giants. And for the record, there are other depositories of those books. But I was specifically told this by the same general that I'm talking about, 4-star plus, that he said that do not go to a certain area of the world. I'm not going to tell you where it was. It wasn't South America, because they will do anything, meaning the guys that don't want the information out, to keep you from finding extractable DNA, because they've already gone before you and they got it. And they do not want the biblical narrative to be underscored by actual genetic evidence. And that launched, ladies and gentlemen, I think that was 19, that was probably, let me do this in my head, Doug, 12 to 13 years ago. So what we're trying to present to you is this. There's nothing new under the sun, as Solomon said. Orwell's famous statement, they who control the past control the future, they who control the determine or, write the past. That's paraphrased. So what this expression of knowledge, I believe we're fulfilling Daniel's time period prophecy, not just us, others too. I'm not claiming anything exclusively except that God has raised up Tim, God has raised me up, others, Tom Horn, everybody who's in this realm, to basically present, a unified field theory of true history. So again, ladies and gentlemen, both the skull and the 12-foot giant, by the way, getting that thing erected is 500 pounds, okay? And you'll be able to see that, and I think it'll put stuff into perspective, because I've been talking about giants for so long, and people go and look at, people that may have suffered from gigantism and everything that's on the internet. But what we're talking about is the eyewitness or the written accounts, and the one that somebody sent me an email on, Klaus Donas in Ecuador. I think that was just, if I'm not mistaken, 21 feet, but that was built or projected off of just a couple bones. And Klaus Donas is one of the smartest people in the world. I know him. I've interviewed him. Tim and I have talked to him on Skype. I think there's a Skype interview where I interviewed him. At one point, he probably possessed or was allowed to have the majority of out-of-place artifacts that people had collected privately and presented them in different areas. And interestingly enough, Japan and I believe, I can't remember, Tim, maybe Korea, the Orientals in that part of the world were very, very interested and fascinating. And I believe even that Universal Studios in Tokyo has a giant exhibit where you get to walk into the mouth of it. Obviously, it's fiberglass saliva, but gee, you can stand in the mouth of a giant who's ready to devour you. And when you see the size of the giant, and Tim, that's up on the Gen 6 website too, isn't it? The giant skull?
It will be. It will be this week.
Okay. I mean, ladies and gentlemen, we've been scrambling because no excuses, but one of the hardest things about this, putting on a conference like this, is to ensure what I would call the flow of data and information. That's why we limit ourselves to 8 speakers, and again, I better just leave it at that. But our focus is so narrow, and I promise you this, that you will watch after the conference. Those of you who are there, those of you who are getting the DVDs, you'll watch history open up. It's like a key. Everything is on a time lock. And Pastor David Langford, by the way, will be at Branson, and he's going to be preaching on Sunday. He's going to be preaching on the Christian response to transhumanism and the words of Jesus in Matthew 24, except the days be short and there be no flesh left alive. So we're pretty excited. And, we got to have about a week or two to catch up. But, again, the people that sign up for their tickets ahead of time or purchase the DVDs ahead of time, they will be getting special email updates. And we'd ask those of you who get those not to share them. You guys are helping us, and we want to provide something in your hand to let you know how much we appreciate you. And, again, if one will chase 1,000 to 10,000, then the people that are being entrusted, and I believe this, with this information are able to embrace it, and God quickens it and makes it alive, you'll have a greater effect on the future than you could ever imagine. Go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, and just so people know, we already have hundreds of people signed up for the conference. So we are already filling up really fast. And that will accelerate as we announce a couple more of the really exciting speakers that we're talking to right now. And one of the things that I think makes our conference so powerful is the fact that we don't divide the speakers up. In other words, we don't have two speakers speaking at the same time. It's a theater setting. It's theater seating. It's in the Mansion Theater, which is a phenomenal venue for the kind of thing that we do, because what Steve and I, as a production company, what we really like to do is make our conference not just a conference of speakers, but a video presentation. So we'll have a bunch of little videos that we're going to be presenting at the conference this year in 2018 in September, and it's a very dynamic atmosphere. And we get big screens installed in the theater for the video production. And so when you sign up to go to our conference, you hear every single speaker. You don't have to worry about dividing your time between two different speakers or choosing speakers. We pick the most powerful roster that we can acquire, and we just line them up one after another so that the entire audience can hear what everybody has to say. And why that's so dynamic, because as was evident in this previous conference in last September, the way that everybody's talks synchronize is incredible. And I'm absolutely positive it's going to be the same this year. Last year we didn't even give our conference a theme. It was just our first True Legends conference, and we didn't really have a theme for it, and yet there was a theme without us having to put one. This year we felt, talking to Steve and I, talking to Tom Horn, we really felt we need to deal with transhumanism and the hybrid age. And Skywatch TV is a big part of this year's conference, and obviously Tom Horn is one of our keynote speakers, and there aren't many people who can match Tom Horn when dealing with the subject of transhumanism. And Steve Quayle and Tom Horn are like the number one adversaries of the transhumanist agenda, and I would say there's a number they're probably number 1 and 2, and there's probably a number 3, and he may be at the conference. We won't say who he is, but so it will absolutely be a dynamic event. And I encourage everybody. We had a lot of people, and this isn't just me trying to peddle this event and make you go sign up for it. Listen, we had a lot of people last year. We got a lot of emails last year from people who were sorely disappointed because they could wait until a couple of months out to go and order their ticket to actually attend the conference. They were very disappointed to find out that the conference had sold out a couple of months before they decided to buy a ticket. So that's the reason why I'm saying that. If you really want to go, we don't want you to miss out. Get in early, and gen6.com, you can sign up.
That's fantastic.
Well, Doug, excuse me, go ahead and speak, because after you speak, I'm going to read you a poem by Randy Conway, randyconway.com, but called The Hybrid Age. So go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, by the way, I met Randy Conway there as well. What a fine gentleman. And again, it just speaks to the caliber of the people there. Go ahead, Steve.
Okay, this is called The Hybrid Age, and this is the first time I've seen it, so I hope I don't, mess up his meter or his rhyme. But the point is, I believe, and this isn't just flattery, I will go on record, Randy is my friend, but when I first started reading his poetry, I knew that God had gifted him with an understanding of the times we live in. He's like one of the sons of Issachar in the world of poetry, but he has the understanding to back up his words. So I would encourage you to go on his website. And again, Randy, if I'm not giving out the right website, send me an email after I read this. I'll make sure it's correct. The Hybrid Age. Victor was just an amateur playing with his cadavers. The Nazi made it their life's goal. It was their ultimate endeavor. To create a man from parts and pieces or improve with a secret brew, it makes no difference if it is what the Watchers did and the endeavor isn't new. CRISPR has come. It's in our hands, and many are the Frankensteins working on their creation to alter all flesh upon the earth in our grasp, and to change mankind will take a single generation. To become a Superman is not the story as in its whole. To live forever seems to be the transhumanist's ultimate goal. Have we arrived in a brave new world, or have we arrived in hell? Are we living in the days of the X-Men or the days of Noah, as the Bible did foretell? In a basement room, a Nephilim spirit is guiding a self-made scientist, and the desire to become a hybrid man the ignorant cannot resist. The proliferation of the Watcher's offspring at one time was beyond number. So many dwelt upon the earth that God destroyed it all when his command for flood did thunder. One man has mastered that which Nimrod did to become a Gibborim. We will have entered the days of Noah and the age of the obscene. Boy, there's a powerful statement. Entropy, prophecy, and technology are all coming to a head. The hybrid age will not see the rise of man. It will make him dead. Today is a day of repentance. Salvation is a gift of Jesus Christ. Singularity is not a progressive evolution. It is a demise of human life. Choose you this day, for tomorrow will be too late. Modification or eradication is left for those who hesitate. Can man survive against a superior race with superior strength in mind? If hybrids will rule the earth in the final age, you don't want to be left behind. And he's not talking about the rapture. He's talking about understanding the future that is now accelerating, exploding, unfolding, and again, Doug, what we're talking about tonight will be classically looked upon 1 year from today, and people said, how did they know? And I will answer that because the living God, surely the Lord God will do nothing except he reveals his secrets to his servants the prophets. Neither myself, Tom Horn, Tim, or anybody associated with us claim to be prophets, but we do claim one thing. We're redeemed by the blood of the Lord Jesus Christ. We're new creations in him, and unknown to me or even those of us who are called, why he chose us, that's his business. But that we be faithful unto our calling is our responsibility, as it is yours, Joe and Doug, because you were called and appointed. And again, haters and critics, your day will come, and there'll be no less, how should I say this, no less of God's judgment that you'll be able to run from. So, Doug, we are so privileged to live in the age we do, because in essence, we're to rescue the perishing. We're to give the good news, the gospel of the Lord Jesus Christ. We're to basically proclaim his kingship, his lordship, and his second coming. But prior to his second coming, there will be the war that has never been before. And as prophets had foretold, and men of old, it's up to God's people to go forth in the power of the living God and to be bold. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be a Randy Conway, but it just came out. So again, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to the end degree. Somebody said, you guys really put it all on the line. Amen. If you don't put it all on the line, what use is it? God never holds back on his graciousness, his mercy, his absolute giving, and God gave good gifts to men. The question is, will we as a men who are the recipients and women of the grace gifts, the charis gifts of God, will we be faithful? And what I see at this point, and obviously I can't see except that which is before my eyes, that which manifests itself as even claiming to be Christians are doing everything they can to deny the very Lord that saved them and that is the time and the age of deception we're in. And by the grace of God, we're going to give you a heads up on this stuff, and that's why we want you to register early, because this is going to be, I don't think there's ever been a word like this, but this is going to be a continuing education or a pre-education prior to the conference, because I believe, again, those who will be led to, hey, I got to register this. You'll be woken in the night, you'll be told. And somebody said, well, how can you make that statement? Simple. I listen to he who commissioned me. Tim knows that which God has called him to. So Tom Horn has been faithful to that which has called him to. And I won't tell you the name of a talk show host. You don't know this yet, Tim, because it was in a phone call before we went on the air. A certain well-known radio personality, television personality, has forbid any of his staff to ever mention Tom Horn's name, I guess my name, and anything associated with that which we're teaching. And for the record, that's a pretty tragic statement because, again, what you're going to see is the love of the great body is going to wax cold, and many people are going to fall away. So, Tim, go ahead.
Yeah, and I just want to before we're done address again the ramifications that we're dealing with here, because there's that question that you mentioned, Steve, that we get. It's probably the question that we get more than any other question, and it is, what does any of this have to do with salvation? Well, when it comes to transhumanism in the hybrid age, when it comes to fundamentally altering the human condition, the human being, the human DNA, the genome that God created for the human race, the implications are salvific, 100% salvific. It could not be more dire, and that's why I'm using these apocalyptic terms. It's because everything is on the line when you talk about transhumanism, when you talk about the new hybrid age. And this, again, is an issue that is it's not something that may happen in the future. This isn't some apocalyptic vision that it's optional for you to subscribe to it if you like the way it sounds, or maybe you feel like it's a little far-fetched. You're not really going to buy into it. You don't have an option this time. You don't have an option this time. It's happening right now. Transhumanism, the hybrid age, is accelerating. It is happening right now. I have four young boys. My 4 boys are going to grow up in a world that is going to be terrifying. And it's going to be terrifying because the hatred for God, the Luciferian impulse in society is going to grow. It's going to burgeon. And believers living in the future, and I'm talking about the near future, are going to have more courage and are going to have to be armed with more knowledge to navigate the times. And of course, Steve always references the verse, "My people perish for lack of knowledge." And I've often had in my mind and heart the verse that zeal without knowledge is dangerous, can lead to death, which is in the New Testament. And there's a lot of people who have zeal for the Lord, but are not armed with knowledge. And this isn't the kind of heady knowledge that puffs up and that is only useful to show how much more you know than your friends, or some petty thing like that. This is knowledge that can save your life and the lives of your neighbors, because we're dealing with, we're dealing with a salvific issue. The alteration of the human genome, the alteration of the human species is a salvific issue, because as Steve said, Jesus came to die for the human race. He did not come to die for the angels that sinned. He did not come to die for the hybrids or for aliens. He came to die for us. And there's a sinister plot afoot to rob humanity of even being a candidate of the salvation in Jesus Christ and the cross of Jesus Christ, and the rectification of the human condition, which is in the resurrection from the dead in Christ. And we're going to be unpacking these things at the conference. I know that I'm going to be giving a continuation of the presentation I gave in Branson in 2017. In fact, I've got some of the more weightier issues that I didn't even deal with at the last at I guess we can call it Branson 1.0 that I'll be delivering in Branson 2.0, which really do deal with the salvific nature of this issue. And in fact, it's interesting. It's interesting that before we had determined what the topic, before we knew what the topic of this year's conference would be, the Lord had already put on my heart to write a book that's been sitting on my spirit for a long time that deals precisely with the content of this conference. I know the same is happening with Steve, and immediately when we talked to Tom, the response from Tom was, we need to talk about transhumanism. And it resonated with all three of us, and we were all moving in that direction anyways. And so I can guarantee you that this conference is providential, and that the information is going to be cutting edge, and it's going to equip you for the times in which we now live. There's a lot of information regarding one of the things that we really want to do is equip people with just the knowledge of how far along things really are in terms of the emerging technologies, how far into the night we have already progressed. And that's one of the reasons why we're flying Hugo de Garrison from China to be at our conference, is because there are few people who can speak with that level of authority when it comes to artificial intelligence, as I mentioned earlier, in robotics, as Hugo de Garrison, who's very well spoken. The guy's a genius, and Hugo has been warning for years about the dangers of constructing massively intelligent artificial intelligence. And even as we listen to the Hagman and Hagman right now, as you guys are tuning in and listening, we're listening on the platform of Google, on YouTube, which is a subsidiary of Google, and Google is actively buying up every company that's making strides in artificial intelligence, robotics, even the companies that have been working with the Defense Department that have been building the most advanced robots for warfare. Google, your search engine company, is buying these things up and is employing some of the greatest minds in the world that in the realms of artificial intelligence and robotics and nanotechnology, and that's a scary thought to me, because Google is becoming almost like a government in and of itself, and I have a special disliking for Google. They banished me from YouTube. They literally took my channel down and told me, basically, we don't like you and you're not allowed to have a YouTube channel. So and I can understand why we're viewed as with such animosity from Google, because the things that we're talking about, the things that Steve's talking about and has been talking about for years, such as the sex bots and so forth, Google's part of the problem. They're the ones who are really pushing and developing, and not just Google. There's a bunch of agencies out there too, and internationally that are pouring billions of dollars into the development of robotics and the other technologies that we mentioned. So really, again, let me just say, there could not be a more cutting-edge topic. There could not be a topic that is burning on my heart and Steve's heart, Tom Horn's heart, more than transhumanism and the hybrid age. So I'll sign off by encouraging all of you to go to the conference, get your tickets early while you can still get them. It's going to be absolutely dynamic. And if you have not seen if you were not able to attend the last conference or did not get a chance to purchase the DVDs, the digital download and the DVDs from True Legends, the conference 2017, are available right now on gen6.com. Thank you, gentlemen, for having me on your show again.
Absolutely. And just fantastic show. Thank you for coming on. I got to tell you, we are very fortunate to have the caliber of people like Steve Quayle and Tim Alberino that we do, and the knowledge. I mean, think of the knowledge that Tim Alberino has. And if you talk to him for 5 minutes, you know you are talking to a scholar. And same with Steve. The amount of knowledge that they've got, and I say this with all sincerity, the amount of knowledge that they have, to me, is intimidating. Did you ever talk to somebody and you're intimidated by the level of knowledge that they've got? I could never engage them in a conversation at their level on this topic. So that's really cool. So Steve, you got the last word.
Well, thank you. And Doug, here's what my goal is. Obviously, if the biggest mistake that generations and men of God, mighty men of God, who have made amazing impact in the world that was, if you notice, the devil has cut off any, if you will, their tapes and videos are still available, but their disciples are lacking. Even as the greats like Derek Prince, there are people like myself who are, fortunate to be blessed by his teaching, his training, and to have met him and been prayed over by him and stuff. But the quality, we're fighting for the generation that's listening to this show on your your program tonight. We want young people to come. And Tom Horn and I have talked about coming up with, a package for the young people. My definition of young people is going to be, under 30. We want to impart to them a level of knowledge so that, look, after we go, we're gone. If we stay, it doesn't matter. But the faithfulness, and by the way, everybody who works for me now is probably Tim's age, 33 or younger, okay? Well, maybe Carlos might be 38, but let's say 40 or under, it's a safe bet. And so, I'm looking personally, obviously, a body of work, and by the grace of God, someone says, how can you do what you do? And my only answer is by the grace of God. Obviously, someone said, they